Hey guys, I'm going to get into a band that is, I think, about the most quietly subconscious impact on me, which is Pink Floyd. And they're the band that I think takes me to the purest essence of just hearing something and feeling completely awe-inspired. I think Pink Floyd just was out to overwhelm you with amazement and awe. All of their albums, and I would say most of the time they're successful. There were a lot of holes, but it's all the more human. They're the most human progressive rock band there is. I think that's what kind of made them an original kind of force. Because again, you got like three completely chill, laid back genius guys, and then you got one challenging dude with a mad god complex. Pink Floyd's literally like a walking progression of like this sort of like fall to dark, like kind of fall to darkness, and much in the ways of like films like Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, this is like literally the band equivalent of like the Francis Ford Coppola progression in the '70s. Because again, like Godfather's Dark Side of the Moon, down to like Godfather Part Two sort of being like Wish You Were Here, Animals. The Apocalypse Now is like the ball basically. But I'll get into all this. I mean, yeah. Pink Floyd's a pretty perfect band to kind of capturing a certain thing that I don't really want to listen to it anymore. So it's almost literally too pure. It's almost too nostalgic. Again, much like Led Zeppelin. Like it's actually I mean, they are the purest band I think at taking you through all of your emotions in their own kind of way. A very technical way of perceiving emotions. And perhaps they're the best band ever at kind of organizing all of that. This progression of just like manhood and kind of feeling like a genius for what you're doing, but then also trying to keep yourself together, not go completely crazy because there's loneliness, isolation to it all too. So they're just like the whole story. And again, losing their best friend along the way. So it's like an epic adventure in its own kind of way entirely. That's the unique thing about Pink Floyd. And they've always, I've never talked about this band out loud. It feels funny even saying the word Pink Floyd out loud. This has always been a quiet go-to for me. I go to them just when I need them most. Piper at Gates of Dawn came out in 1967. And this definitely features Sid Barrett, and this is sort of just a showcase. It's really not one of my favorite albums to listen to. Really. This is sort of like a David of the 60s psychedelia. It's like, okay, I'm listening to it as a study on madness more than anything else. I much prefer listening to the Beatles' take on madness, honestly, for this year. This is kind of just capturing a certain insanity in its own kind of way. And it's pretty good. I mean, it feels like its own kind of story entirely. You got songs like Flaming and Scarecrow. They're just really fascinating. But they definitely can be grating if you're not in the mood. It's kind of overwhelming. Sid Barrett's such a mad, insane person. And it just feels like a lot of madness is captured in a very pure essence here. And so it makes it pretty special and unique. A lot of that childlike wonder was in this album. And I really do enjoy some moments in this album. Like sometimes like stuff like the Scarecrow will come back, the Gnome will come back to me, because I know I think I sort of interestingly perceived a lot of rock music. I hear a strange subconscious connection to a lot of like Lord of the Rings mythology, and I think Pink Floyd kind of reminds me a little bit of that too, where I feel like I'm just listening to like just this mad, crazy. But then it kind of builds up to the best stuff, and it's like almost awkward to say, but I kind of learned in time. Sometimes those melancholic places are where a person's best moments can shine, and sometimes there's a awkward place where it's like you gotta kind of admit to being one of those. Pink Floyd is kind of a walking force of coming to that. It's like they're basically making everything about how much they miss their best friend from this particular album. This is almost like the moment of childlike innocence and wonder before it gets crazy out there, big and crazy. And it's a really gradual process and build up. It feels like an epic sort of rise and fall story in itself, the way it all progresses out. You got like a saucer full of secrets in 1968, and it's really quite a nice follow-up to Piper Gates. And I prefer listening to this album slightly. I think it's a little more, because again, this is an original position. Now there's originally 5 members in the band for this one particular moment. You got those 4 masterminds there, but not really. But then you got David Gilmour. I mean, he's I think the best part of the band. I mean, Roger Waters is actually equally perfect. But again, he's like a Stanley Kubrick kind of like where it's just like it's overwhelmingly cold-hearted. Like again, serious as the army. Like I mean, yeah, like Pink Floyd's kind of serious as the army. But this is a good. But you hear the essence of like, okay, well that's good, because they're about life and death and spirituality more than anything else in their own kind of way. But the growth and difference in this album from the last one, it's a lot more open to just kind of jamming out without getting too over the top mad. Like I think Sid Barrett, you can feel like Sid Barrett's death is kind of crippling. The death of his innocent spirit is kind of crippling over this album a little bit. But it feels like the band's just kind of in their own sort of innocent place. Stuff like Remember a Day at Seesaw feels kind of a borderline balance of like being nostalgic and creepy at the same time. And it feels like it's like Sid Barrett's literally doing the blues on this album. It's really cool. The best stuff is stuff like Sets for the Control Hearts of the Sun. I mean, it's really subtle, and it feels like this kind of tribe of just standing in the face of the sun, but it's really a trippy song. So is the Saucer Full of Secrets. That song is crazy. It's an extended song that just really goes for something maddening, and I enjoy it a lot. I mean, let there be more light too. But then you got Umagame in 1969. It's so that's the first half of it's like perfect, but then the second half is really bad. So it's weird. But it's definitely a transitional phase. I mean, because stuff like the Grantchester Meadows, it's just really different for the band because it's just a really slow-paced kind of folk song. Just Roger Waters is like just really being playful before he gets too more serious. Like, I mean, he's just literally playing around with like animal stuff. I think that's the thing about a lot of this kind of music. I kind of learned that, and of course, Pink Floyd's like kind of the band that is sort of telling you this. It's like a lot of this madness of like kind of having an obsession with the arts, kind of pop culture, is that there's almost an animalistic outlet living inside every person, and an ego is easily inflated when you're in the depths of this stuff. It could take a person like myself a long time to grasp that picture 100% clarity. So that's kind of been the point of all this, growing from naivete. That's sort of realized this first film was all about growing into naivete and let's see what happens next. And that's the way it always is meant to go. And Pink Floyd bands like them, the best progressive rock bands, can kind of guide you through the tough times. The best parts of this album are like stuff like Careful with That Axe, Eugene, by far, which had perfect use in the film's Whiskey Point. But I love this song because, I mean, it really feels like a horror film is playing out. I really love this stuff. And it feels like it's kind of the band sort of in a soul-searching mood. That's what makes this different from anything else from like Dark Side of the Moon on. The band wasn't a uniquely soul-searching mood. It sounds like they were much closer friends. It sounds like a closely knitted friendship because they needed David Gilmour. It's almost like, okay, this guy, their best friends went mad, so they literally need a man who's such a genius, creative mastermind. And that's the essence of what's cool about it. And Mastermind is almost out. It's almost like this other guy is out dominating their best friend completely in a way. And this other guy's just kind of got to go mad and just sit down and take it, basically. So, that's a lot of it right there. But again, being like a warped mastermind, you could say. David Gilmour was like a lot like I don't know, like he's a perfect man. Like at playing a lot of ways. His sound is perfect, and I love his whole spirit and their whole perspective. Like it really is an angel kind of coming right out of that man. His perspective is quite wonderful too. He had the more grounded, kind of relaxed perspective, more like a Kate Bush-like perspective of everything, kind of like love for life and the world around you. While Roger Waters was more going completely mad, seeing the animalistic nature that lives in everybody. And Adam Hartmuther in 1970. I mean, here's the thing. I really don't like the self-title track. It really rambles. That's like, again, Pink Floyd's really aimless. I think that's the problem that happened with this part of Pink Floyd. It got a little aimless at this point. But then the middle three songs are quite amazing because it just feels like it's taking a lot of influence from the White Album by the Beatles and just kind of doing its own thing entirely. Songs like If. I mean, it really is just something special. Summer 68 is my favorite on the album. I really love that jam. It just kind of captures the feeling and spirit of just being in the summer in 1968. And it's in a way entirely. I really don't like Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast. That's a horribly cheesy song. That's really the bad and dated in the psychedelia. The good stuff is literally a lot of Beach Boy, like Brian Wilson era stuff too. It kind of reminds me a little bit of influence of that also. Just a portrait, I said, basically. It's really different. But then they really got special with this phase with Pink Floyd whenever metal came around in 1971. And that's when it feels like they just really ditched everything going on around them and they just became more energetic in their approach and just a little more human about it too. Like they kind of like open up from a lot of like wholeheartedness here. It's quite epic. I mean, it's really peaceful and relaxing. That's the best way I can describe most of this album. While also exploring a lot of melancholic emotions. And it's a really specific kind of feeling and mood. And I mean, people would never ever do this sound again. It's different. And everything they do, it's like they would go on and progress to better quality. But here, it's like the foundation of friendship is kind of right on the edge. But they're right on the closest knit because it's so peaceful. But it gets really dark again, and this literally comes from a bitter attitude the band kind of has towards each other. And like, again, a lot of drama going on in the band. You don't know about the drama. The other three members don't want drama. Roger Waters got dramatic. This is sort of before it got too dramatic. It sounds like guys that you would want to hang out with. Like that's the feeling I get when I listen to metal. It sounds like guys kind of just taking in a lot of like Miles Davis, just a lot of jazz stuff and doing their own language of it entirely. Just so different from the Beatles, honestly. Pink Floyd's a very different realm. It feels like they're always kind of out. What's it like to be a person that's always perceiving stuff like the highlights of the Beatles? What's it like to be that person? They're more philosophical about it, even more, I'd say. And then I feel like Radiohead kind of evolved this to the modern world. This is sort of the original Radiohead. I mean, Floyd kind of did it first, although I personally prefer Radiohead a little bit for going even further into detail. What I really love about this is just like, I mean, a feeling of the Winds and Fearless are just really ethereal, and they really just perfectly portray Pink Floyd as just this perfect sound that's, again, kind of capturing an innocence, a jazzy time. and a really relaxing kind of feeling the entire way through. And then Echoes is extremely melancholic because that's just like a love that can't possibly happen to a person. But the temptation was even brought, and that actually just drove his soul mad. So that's really what the song's about. But then finding peace and clarity, finding God through that, in yourself. And then it just keeps getting better from here. Because then it just goes completely off the rails, man. But after they made Obscured by Clouds in 1972, which is a very warm album actually. Like they were kind of. Or dark. I mean, they're kind of in a hazy moment where you feel like you're just hanging out, absorbing some nice autumn weather, and having a picnic. That's what it feels like Pink Floyd was on to at this point. It feels like they're just hanging out, having a picnic, and then it's going to go insane from here. So it just keeps kind of building up. Then we get to Dark Side of the Moon in 1973. And this is what really introduced me, and a lot of people. I think this is like the album that's like the most iconic of all time. Literally, like this is the album. This is what kind of let's dive into some music. And I think they got better, honestly. I think with Wish You Were Here Animals, but I'm really right on that idea that this is definitely one of them, like an album that warrants being one of the most popular of all time. I mean, because it literally is just a very universal notion that it's tapping into, and that's what all film is. Maybe that's the thing. It's almost a little slightly basic next to the following. Now they get more complicated in their themes. Because here it's like this is almost just what every single film's doing. It's the ultimate, like, yep, that album, It's like, because I feel like all these films are kind of, it's like, and the idea is, what is it to explore madness in a person? What is it to look at madness and everything around you? And this is, I think, people want to get to the basic, simplistic essence of what are the things that drive a person mad. And they simply just say it with this album. I think the person, and these are like things that I think at the time were things were hard to talk about through music, because I think they were seeing how film was able to do this in a certain kind of way. So again, it's like these different topics. So like death, facing fear, anxiety, it's just like songs like Time, Nothing, Then, and just feeling like compassion and more, feeling anxiety about war. There's a lot of that going on. Songs like Money, I mean, a lot of it's very 70s. A lot of it feels like it's definitely of its time, but it's the best kind of, it's definitely like hanging out, feeling a little bit, but it's very deep into just at the same time. And I think it really is like an excellent essence of a lot of stuff to come. But I think I wouldn't even give this like a 5-star. I would give this like a 4.5, honestly, because they literally just get better, honestly, because it's more complicated when they get straight to the heart. When they get to the heart, it's better until it gets overblown with the wall. That's when the heart gets too emo. It's too emo. There's a limit. Pink Floyd could be a good walking representation of it, getting too overbearingly emo. Wish You Were Here in 1975 is the perfect album. I mean, that's technically the best one. Although I personally prefer Animals slightly, but I'll get into that. But Wish You Were Here is the most heartfelt and emotional. This is heart. This is a Pink Floyd getting straight to the heart, and seeing a contrast of a loss of humanity with just machinery. Just a robotic kind of lifestyle. They were kind of just taking on, again, I think the film this makes me think of the most is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is like the ultimate balance of humanity and cold-heartedness, and kind of seeing the ultimate combination of the two. And I mean, it's definitely just one of the best albums ever made. It just kind of captured, exploring all of these different kind of themes. So again, missing your best friend of all time. Because this is kind of like a mental horror was kind of haunting this band, because literally what happened was after Dark Side of the Moon, they were like the most popular band in the world. So they were like, they're outranking the Beatles, and I think this got to their heads in such a harsh way because, well, the best friend that they actually care about doesn't get to experience any of this, and he's too mentally insane to possibly have any desire for it. So, that actually hurts him so bad that like it was haunting him horribly. So this is like whole album is dedicated to that. He literally even came around while they were there, and it felt like they should describe it as the most uniquely depressing feeling of all time. And that's why they were out to convey with this album, kind of just this impersonal melancholy, much like the film Barry Lyndon was. That was 1975. That was a year of a lot of impersonal melancholy, kind of really being expressed in an original kind of way. And Pink Floyd was perhaps next to Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell. This is perhaps some of the best stuff to do that in this year of music. I mean, I think that, so many films are doing this. One for the Cuckoo's Nest, Barry Lyndon, they all kind of have this tone to them. Even Dog Day Afternoon. And that's just the way that this also kind of just gets us like Welcome to the Machine, which is just capturing a very intense machinery kind of robotic kind of feeling, which is just very, against living. You can say it feels very dead. It sounds dead, you could say it a lot of ways. And influences a lot of the 80s. It sounds very much like an influence and foreshadow to the 80s, which is what a lot of the later Pink Floyd was doing. So they wanted to be more punk. I think they were kind of the original ones to do it, much like Nirvana was doing. I think in a superior way, they were just like, they really wanted to go against the grain badly and rebel, and about the most adult. They kind of, I think, had the most adult way of rebelling, you could say. So they were just rebelling completely by being, a flowery, kind of feeling, a quiet, impersonal, sort of melancholic, much like classical music. They were going for more of a classical music kind of feeling rather than even like the Beatles. I feel like they were going for that even more. They hit that even note even more. It feels like in a completely modern. They bring it to a completely modern sense, and that's really important and timeless in the end. Yeah, I mean the self-title track is just perfect because I mean it's just really incredible. Feels like it's just about the best at expressing just impersonal melancholy, but then kind of feeling all right in the end because it's almost like they in the album literally ends on a note of "Don't be sad because it's over, smile because it happened." And that's kind of what the whole essence of what you were here kind of is. It's just a smile because it happened kind of thing, which is just very original, very beautiful. I love this album very much, and it certainly has literally. I've shedded a lot of I think come to a lot of peace and from a lot of tears through this album in particular. It's really perfect at capturing that. Then it gets even better on Animals in 1977. That's the best album Pink Floyd ever made. It's literally the best progressive rock album I think perhaps I've ever heard. Because it's literally a combination of progressive rock and punk, but it doesn't sound anything like punk, but it literally has the philosophy of punk to it. So I think that makes it Pink Floyd's best achievement because they are a cold band from the start. So I think they're just the most honest about how cold they are after you get through the sentimentality of which you were here. And this is kind of just getting to the aftermath. Like this is the essence of a man, literally Roger Waters, particularly over dominating man. He was out for power, madman, for craving some power. And the other three band members didn't want that. They were like literally just just wanted to chill. But all three of the particular main courses of songs, that's the difference between this year here. That one is like two epics surrounding it and three shorter songs. This is, you got, two super mini songs in the front and back, and then three massive epics right in between. And all three, Dogs, Pigs, and Sheep, they put me in such a transcendental state that kind of just ultimately brought me to a piece of loneliness in my life, it feels like, because it is kind of like, even if it's cold, it's kind of just true, kind of in a lot of ways. A lot of this, what's going on, a lot of the ways you're feeling, and a lot of your anxiety isn't wrong necessarily. I like to listen to this particularly late at night, early in the morning too, feeling like the dawn kind of coming through. I love Animals. It's definitely a pretty cold-hearted album. It's just like a man kind of right on the days before he's going too crazy, but he's kind of on the depths of like, man, like kind of feeling. Dogs really is that's my favorite Pink Floyd song. It's very close. Shine On You Crazy Diamond comes very close as an essence, but Dogs, I think it's 17 minutes long and it doesn't feel like a moment of it's just like overbroad. It feels like all the best jazz songs. Like sometimes it's long and it's just always necessary to be so long. And all the unique kind of sounds coming through here are absolutely perfect. Pigs is just really groovy, and I don't know. I can just get lost in the trip. Again, I think this might have woken me up because I listened to this for the first time when I was 15 on a road trip. And I remember it's like 5:00 in the morning, just going on my way to the beach and just it felt so right because it is like a certain kind of paradise and loneliness that but I ultimately need to recognize even that paradise is dark ultimately to feel because it won't always add up. It's a reality. Roger Waters was just passing deep in on a lot of this, so he was, a lot of political frustration was going into a lot of this too. So I mean, there's a lot of that happening with Animals and going from that George Orwell perspective, where it's kind of just intense rebellion against things that are worth rebelling against, like people, Margaret Thatcher particularly, they were really rebelling against her and their kind of her perspectives in general. They were just like pretty bad. It sounds like in a lot of ways and rotten. So Pink Floyd was out to rebel against the rottenness that was in the air in the late 70s. The synthesizer work going into songs like Sheep are just so perfect, and it's really just about the best album. Yeah, progressive rock album. It's like up there with the best like King Crimson. I think I prefer this because this is like, again, kind of being on a dark depth, but it makes sense how you got there in a lot of ways. So I think it's their best moment. It really is just like songs that just really are amazing. They kind of have groove to it. They're groovy, I mean, it's always good, always timeless. Yeah, it's a perfect album. I recommend that one to everybody. It's underrated, I think, for Pink Floyd. I think it's a wall in 1979, and I think that's definitely. I think it has its moments where it's quite a genius, but I think a lot of times it is just literally you're hearing a madman just with the overbearing ego, kind of literally going off the rails because it's like his perspectives of war just kind of exploded. It's like he's just this mad guy going crazy with pain, and I think sometimes. And that's why it's not one of my favorite albums. I think it's just going way too far into like literally again that overbearing emo feeling, which is where it just feels like it's complaining rather than kind of solving a problem. That's the feeling I want to come to Melancholia with. It's like I'm solving a problem rather than trying to just scream and whine or complain about. I hate complaining personally. Like, it feels rotten to me to even talk about because it's like I can feel through these things and end up saying the nice side of it, and and that's the thing, like. And it's not fully to criticize guys like Kurt Cobain or Elliott Smith because I kind of get where they're going at, but in a lot of ways, like some of this stuff it's almost like too much of a sad sack like, kind of thing. Letting out your hormonal frustrations and not being able to leave that. And it turns into again, a lot of that, like, you start going crazy, and a lot of metaphors of war start to come around in your head. That's what's scary about a lot of that, you know, sexual frustration. That's why I think it turns out this kind of ends up being like, okay, in the end, after Animals happened, Pink Floyd became a little dated next to all of the actual punk coming around. Like, bands like The Clash came around in 1979, and they made them better. Neil Young, I think they kind of had the better outlook on madness by this point. So Pink Floyd definitely kind of had an ultimate rise and fall, much like Francis Ford Coppola did with Apocalypse, making Apocalypse Now. Like, that literally drove him so crazy, like that it literally made him, yeah, it was never the same again, basically. So the ultimate cautionary tale lives in Pink Floyd. This is kind of like the deep end in a lot of ways, and that's what I love the whole progression. I'll cherry pick songs like beautiful songs like "Hey You." That's what it is. Just living in complete, you know, alone, and then you just feel like you need something of a god to kind of point your finger at you. If you're comfortably numb, it's just what it is to feel just beautiful in that isolation because the world around you is so beautiful, but you're also alone, you know. But it's like it's okay because the world's okay, kind of thing. And you know, I grew up an only child, so I don't. That's why I think I can have an easy time adapting with all that. 'Cause it just all connects exactly to how I function in my whole entire life, basically. So, but I understand there's an impersonal melancholia to it because when you start to see things from other people's perspective, that's when you kind of start waking up to it in a lot of ways. It's like, you know, again, the lack of selfishness. I think you could say a lot of selfishness was kind of starting to kick in with the band. And, you know, it kind of makes me think a lot about that. It's just like, when's the limit when it's just too much selfishness, you know, when it's just, are you even giving to anybody anymore? Kind of, you know, and that's the thing. I think admitting to selfish because it is selfish in the first place. But I think in the time you start to see that, yeah, it can be overblown. You know, it can, yeah, selfishness can overblow into something that is tormenting, and you can't leave that behind in a lot of ways. Just like in the end, Roger Waters kind of like, you know, it's like it's a rotten place this band kind of fell into because literally, I mean, like the friendship was kind of ruined between him and David Gilmour. The beautiful foundation had, so a lot of drama was going on, very intense drama. And the stuff in the '80s was never really the same. Right, David Gilmour took cover, and it feels like there's nothing bad. It definitely is almost a cheesy end, you could say, rather than the, you know, I think it's almost a challenging place of where Roger Waters was kind of a genius mastermind at that point too. So it's like, oh man, like literally like a Stanley Kubrick. So what do you do with a guy like that? You know, yeah, like just keep him chained, let him keep going mad crazy. You know, don't actually take it out on anything seriously. You know, because you know that's the whole idea. You're not paying attention if you actually snap and go crazy. You know, that's that's Roger Waters, you know, coming like right there. But that's the thing about Pink Floyd; they're pretty fantastic listener. They're always worth. I don't really like listening to them all the time now because I feel like I want it more hoppity hop these days. Typically, like Steely Dan, I think captures this essence even better. Some bands do, but I think, but at the same time, what they do is extremely timeless and important. And I always will come back to this in certain phases. You know, a certain phase where I just need to sit down and think. You know, for a little while. That's the feeling of Pink Floyd is. A man's got to sit back. A person's got to sit back and think. You know, for a little bit. You know, get a calm and soothing perspective on their own intense, mad soul. You know, that's what Pink Floyd's kind of meant to guide you through from its entire essence through their prime era. I think that it really ends with Animals and cherry pick a couple songs from the wall. And that kind of is in the song High Hopes, which they did in 1994. That was the last album they made, The Division Bell. And High Hopes is a perfect kind of conclusion of David Gilmour literally just feeling depressed that the band it felt like the dream failed really hard to David Gilmour in the end. That's kind of what Pink Floyd is. It almost is an ultimate capture of a perfect thing happening within, yeah, a failure kind of comes right after. So, yeah, I recommend Pink Floyd to everybody. I mean, it's pretty universal what they're doing. It's kind of definitely taking the ultimate foundation of just look at yourself in this as a person in the world in the midst of being a fan of all this stuff, you know, and the madness that comes along too. It's kind of what all this is meant to capture. And yeah, I mean, again, I slightly prefer how Radiohead does it now because I think Tom York is just and Johnny Greenwood in particular, a whole band. I mean, they kind of just take this foundation and they kind of talk straight to your gut and soul of like, you know, literally don't go mad with power. It's sort of the essence of a lot of this stuff. Look at the world around you, be a product of your, you know, a freedom, you know, for yourself in a way. You don't let yourself be truly confined, you know, like don't also detach too much from reality. I think a lot of this is a cautionary tale of being too detached from reality. I think that this is almost like a deep end, you know, going too far into a lot of this stuff, a lot of the psychedelic stuff, particularly. Pink Floyd's not a psychedelic band whatsoever. It's like how David Lynch is, I think, in a sense. It's like they're like psychologists looking at a madness around them, and that's different, a different plane to be on. Werner Herzog too. But it feels like it is on that borderline on that psychedelic perspective, but it's really not at all. That's kind of the idea that's different and progressive about all of that stuff in general. So they're an important band, and I recommend them to anybody. They're quite fantastic.